there Star Wars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk Bounty video, and welcome to episode 118 of Ask Boss Bounty. This is the series that drops every Sunday where you ask me questions, and every week I do my very best to answer them for you. So if you do have a question for next week's episode, please leave it in the comment section below as always, and hopefully you'll be featured next week. This week we have some great questions, some really interesting topics to go through. So if you do happen to enjoy the video, don't forget to drop a like down below, as it really helps the video and the channel. And with all that being said, let's get straight on to the first question. Moon Minerhead says, Bossk, do you think they will make a new Pike Syndicate action figure without the helmet or mask from the book of Boba Fett? So I'm not too sure whether they'll do it without the helmet or the mask, but I'm pretty certain that we will eventually get a Pike Syndicate figure. I think it's a perfect one for army building and things like that. I'm sure a lot of people would want to buy like multiples of that one. So I think it makes sense for Hasbro to do that. We haven't had really too much from the Book of Boba Fett yet this year, and I'm not too sure how much more we're going to get. But I think if you're going to bet on which figures are going to be made, I think the Pike Syndicate figures would be a pretty safe bet. The Hyperspace Vault says, congratulations to the contest winners. Question for next week, Tim. With over 28,000 Razor Crests, do you think the figures Grogu and the off-world Jawa are now more common than their mainline counterparts VC-184 and VC-203? That's a good question, and I think even though there are 28,000 of each figure that were included in the Razor Crest, I kind of think that the ones that are in the mainline, there is more of those. I think 28,000, it seems like a big number, but I think if you're thinking about all of the figures all across the world, not just the States, I've got a feeling that there's going to be more than 28,000 of the off-world Jawa, for example, especially the off-world Jawa. People wanted to army build him. People were buying him by the case. And even the Grogu figure, it's a popular character. You know, sort of casual fans, if they see him on the shelf, would have picked him up. Kids are going to like Baby Yoda and things like that. I've got a feeling they would have, you know, produced this one in mass quantities, especially if you count, as I say, all of the ones across the world and not just the States. And with the Razor Crest, we know for a fact there is a finite number of 28,000. They may have made some more for damaged items and things like that, but roughly 28,000. Alicio Bazan says, good afternoon, question for next week. Now that Hasbro has Tarkin on their minds, re-releasing him in the Black Series archive line, do you believe the odds are higher that we will get a full new sculpt of Tarkin in his grey, more accurate outfit? And if so, do you think it would be on a Rogue One card or a New Hope card back? Now, this is a really interesting question for me, so thank you so much. Now, in front of you here are 4 figures here. Now, if you're on Instagram, then you may have seen that the next rumoured reissue wave contains these 4 here. So we have Nin Num, Princess Leia in her Bespin outfit, we have Logray, and we have Dengar. Now, for me, that's a really good wave of figures. I think some of those are pretty hard to get, especially these 2 here towards the end of the line. Some of those were quite hard to get originally back when they first came out. For me, I'm very, very happy because the 2 that we have carded here, I do not have those figures loose, so I'm over the moon to be able to get Nin Num loose. That is great. So when you talk about Tarkin, for me, I really would not want them to re-release the Tarkin that we already have. I don't like the soft goods skirt. You're right, I think it is the wrong colour. And I think having a newly sculpted Tarkin would then open it up for other Imperial officers that we desperately need. You know, Piet, people like that. There's new ones from The Mandalorian. I forget his name, but the guy that was on Morak before, spoiler alert, Migs Mayfeld decided to shoot him. You know, characters like that. We've got Imperial officers all over the place that would be great. But I think going forward, if they're ever going to do that, I would much prefer it if we had a all-new sculpt for that figure. And that includes Tarkin, especially Tarkin, in fact. I really don't like that soft goods piece of material. I don't know why they did that. If you look at the Black Series Tarkin, that is a fantastic figure, and they have since then made other Imperial officers using that sculpt, and that is the way they need to go. So Hasbro, if you're listening, please don't reissue him in a reissued line. You need to revisit that figure from the ground up. Fortuna Bibb says, so now that the Razor Crest has finally arrived, has Hasbro kept their promise releasing figures that interacted with it? If not, what figures are missing that they should definitely do? So I did a whole video on the missing figures of the Razor Crest. I will leave a link for it there, and I'll probably put it in the description below as well. And I went through a lot of the figures that I felt interacted with the Razor Crest. Now, some of the figures, you know, may have had a fleeting interaction with the Razor Crest, and I think Hasbro didn't really want us to take it too literally in terms of the figures that interacted with the Razor Crest. I think on a whole, we've got the main major characters that interacted with the Razor Crest. albeit I think we could have done with a season 1 version of Greef Karga. He's the standout one for me, the major figure, and also the Blurg. It's not a figure, but I think the line is really missing a Blurg. You know, creatures in general it's missing, but I think on the whole I'm quite happy with the figures that we've got from the Mandalorian and the ones that interacted with the Razor Crest. Of course I would love the prison gang from that episode, but that might be a stretch too far in terms of, you know, the figures that actually interacted with the Razor Crest. It would be nice, but I don't think we're going to get those anytime soon. But so yeah, I think we've done okay, but I think there's always room for more. Patreon supporter Miles Hook says, hi Tim, question for next week. With the SDC starting back up with people attending, do you think there'll be an exclusive or exclusives at that event that will not be accessible for non-attending? Last couple of years, all exclusives have been online and accessible for the most part. So I think, if my memory serves me right, before the whole sort of issue with not being able to attend conventions happened over the last couple of years, I'm pretty sure that Hasbro made the exclusives available, at least on Hasbro Pulse. In the UK, we're always able to get those sorts of things anyway. They are in limited supply. But I do remember a few years ago that some of those exclusives were not just SDCC exclusives. They made them exclusives for the London Comic Con and the one in Germany, I believe, as well. So there was multiple ways that you could get them. And I think they also put them on Hasbro Pulse. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I know that those things sold out pretty quick. But I don't think we're ever going to get to the stage now where you've got to attend an actual convention to get these things. And thank God for that. Dark Gara says, hey, congrats on 20k subs and congrats to the winners. Question, any idea how we, the community, can let Hasbro know that we are not happy with the current Clone Trooper sculpt? As you have already noted, they are too skinny, the Phase 2 helmet is too oversized, and I can see the chin of the clone showing up a bit when the helmet is on. And it makes me crazy. So I'm not too sure what else I can do, my friend. I made a video yesterday with my son and we mentioned that Clone Trooper sculpt once again. I am definitely not happy with it. I think he is too skinny. This is the figure that we opened up on the video with my son yesterday, and it's Commander Fi, and it basically uses the old Clone Trooper sculpt underneath. And you can just see the legs there. You know, it actually looks like you can fit a human being in that armor. Whereas the current sculpt, it just looks too skinny, it looks too animated. In terms of letting Hasbro know, you've just got to make sure you mention it on forums, on the Vintage Collection Facebook group. I know there is Hasbro employees that monitor that, so, you know, bring it up in discussion on there. And I think it definitely needs to be done. Every time they use that sculpt now, it really does annoy me, because so many figures are being wasted where they could look so much better. But fingers crossed we can do something about it. Jesse Perry says, question for next week. I have no doubt that the first figures for the Kenobi Disney Plus series will come out for the Black Series first, but do you think we'll have to wait too long to see them in TVC? I'm eager to see what this version of Obi-Wan is going to look like. So I think, again, another rumour that we had on Instagram very recently was about a retro collection line of Obi-Wan figures, and I think if they're due to come out, then I think we can bet our bottom dollar that we will be getting vintage collection figures for the Obi-Wan series sometime this year. In fact, I do remember watching a podcast with my friends from the SWTVC Instagram group. They had Jason from Yakface as a guest on there, and he said that, you know, you won't have to wait longer than 2022 to get a figure of Obi-Wan Kenobi, for example. Now, that is great news. Whether or not the Black Series will get them first, probably. They seem to do that, don't they? That's how the Black Series works. But as long as we don't have to wait too long for them in the Vintage Collection, then I'm happy. Ryan Daly says, question, do you know if there's any upcoming Vintage Collection releases for The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker? Are these figures wanted by collectors? So, first of all, as far as I'm aware, there are no figures from those three films due to be released this year. That's from what I know. However, the wider conversation is, you know, are these figures wanted by collectors? Now, let me know in the comments down below what you feel about this. My personal opinion on it is that if there is a limited tooling budget, which there is at Hasbro for how many figures get made a year, and you said to me, would you rather have a figure from the OT or Rogue One or The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, or would you prefer something from The Rise of Skywalker? Then hands down, every single time I'm going to pick those other medias, because although I don't hate those films and wouldn't necessarily say no to a figure from those films, for me, they are right at the bottom of my want list. But let me know in the comments. Like, I'd love to know your overall opinions about this. You know, would you even buy them at all? Let me know. General Grievous says, congrats on 20k. Question for next week. Is it better to buy Black Series or the Vintage Collection? Now, I don't really understand what you mean by that question. Is it from like an investment point of view, or, you know, my opinion? I think it's obvious which I prefer, but there was someone in my comment sections the other day that was almost saying that I was, you know, pitching one against the other. And, you know, let me just state this right now. That is completely untrue. I've got some very good friends that enjoy the Black Series. I've got friends and collecting buddies that enjoy both lines, and I would never want one to take away from the other. You know, me, I collect the Vintage Collection, and from my point of view, I will do everything I can to try and get more out of that line. But I would never want that to take away from somebody's wants and enjoyment, basically, in collecting Star Wars figures. If you enjoy the 6-inch line, then that's absolutely fine. If you're talking about, you know, what's better, then, you know, that's entirely up to you. I think they serve two different purposes. Black Series figures are, in my opinion, more for a display thing on the shelf, out of the packaging, in poses, toy photography, that kind of thing, looking pretty cool. The Vintage Collection is more about the world building, and also if you are a fan of the Vintage Collection card back, which harks back to the Kenner days. You know, lots of people are just carded collectors. A lot of people like them loose. Some people collect it for both reasons, like I do. I love the figures loose, but I also enjoy the card back, and that's for me why the Vintage Collection is the perfect mix. For the Black Series, I wouldn't really be too concerned with the packaging particularly. I'd prefer to just enjoy the figures. But for me, I also do like the vehicles and the play sets and things like that, everything that goes with it. So for me, it has to be the 3.75 inch scale, just purely because of the room for everything, you know. Eric Martel says, hi Tim, Bossk, question for next week. With the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi coming next year and the trend for Hasbro on dioramas, do you think they will release a new or re-release Ewok Village playset through Hasbro Pulse or on Haslab? Thanks again. I would absolutely love that. I can't say one way or the other whether they'll do that or not. What I can say though is that the Ewok Village in its entirety, we've only ever really had that once, haven't we, in the Kenner line. I don't think they've ever released an Ewok Village in the modern line. They may have done pieces for it and things like that, but that would be awesome. I would absolutely love an Ewok Village in the Haslab or as a Pulse exclusive or whatever way they want to do that. You know, we've got enough figures for it, haven't we? We've got loads of Ewoks, so that would be awesome. But in terms of the Return of the Jedi 40th anniversary, I know that we can expect a better showing than we did for Empire Strikes Back, just purely because of the health of the line that it is in now. You know, I think we're going to see some good stuff next year. Matthew Martin says, great bounty episode. Again, Tim, how do you see the Pulse exclusive versus Haslab releases working? Or if the Pulse exclusive goes well, is this the new way of moving forward? So I think it's how they said it is. I think some of those massive dream items, that's what Haslab was designed for, and I think we'll still see those going forward. Things that maybe don't qualify for that standard, maybe a bit smaller, a bit cheaper, then they'll go down the Hasbro Pulse route. I think we're going to see both from now on. As far as I know, I think the playset has sold quite well. It seems to have had a good reception, and you know, if that's the case, they'll probably do more of that kind of thing. But I don't think they're going to give up on the Haslab idea either. I think, you know, it's a bit of a money maker for them at the end of the day. And moving on to that, that's another question about Haslab. Owen Brown says, congrats on 20k. Question for next week. With the Razor Crest now out, what would you like to see as the next TVC Haslab? I personally would love the Mos Eisley Cantina. I think the Cantina is right up there on my wants. The Sandcrawler, I've gone on record saying multiple times, I would love a Sandcrawler. I think the next time they do a Sandcrawler, it's got to be bigger and better than anything we've got before. And because it was in the Mandalorian, they could make it have like a dual purpose. I think that would be flipping awesome. You could have that whole droid sale thing going on from A New Hope. That it would just be awesome, and it would be something that I could really see like a Haslab project being. You know, it would be big, basically. However, I would also like to see them experiment with Haslab and maybe do a group of figures. I've said this before as well, you know, like a group of figures that they're just never going to do at retail. Some really sort of deep cut background characters would be awesome. Ty Rex says, hey boss, what do you think about Hasbro possibly making a new Mandalorian N1 Starfighter for the Vintage Collection? Do you think the show may introduce other vehicles for him to fly before settling on a final ship, possibly circling back to a new Razor Crest? I've got no idea what they plan to do for that, but what I can say is that I would be very surprised if they didn't do the N1 Starfighter. I don't want to say a dead cert, but I can really see them doing that one. No idea how they put that one out, whether it's Haslab or a, you know, Pulse exclusive or whatever, a retail release. I can just see them doing it. It's the sort of thing that they would put out in the vintage collection. Michael Kaufman says, Tim, do you think the release of the Pulse Jabba's Palace, we could possibly get a Pulse Jedi Council room with maybe an exclusive Mace or Yaddle? It's a great idea. I've got to admit, I do like that scene. I personally don't think that would be on the table at the moment. I'm pretty sure Emily said on one of those Q&As that basically these play sets, they look at like new media and where it fits in and things like that. So, you know, because Jabba's Palace has featured in the Book of Boba Fett, it brings it back to being current. And it's also got the connection for the Return of the Jedi. So you've got that sort of perfect sort of storm for them to be able to create that. So going forward, I think you need to look at scenes that have been maybe used multiple times. For example, the Tantive 4 playset was a perfect example. You've got the original A New Hope and you've got it featured in Rogue One. So perfect scenario for Hasbro. Alright then guys, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for watching as always. Thank you to my Patreon supporters and channel members. Thank you all so much for getting me to 20k. It's been awesome and I hope you've enjoyed the giveaways as well. If you happen to enjoy the video as I mentioned before, don't forget to drop a like down below and we shall see you on the next one.